Yeah, right. So I had tried to use a program to give you a whiz-bang fancy graphics map, but it wanted me to create an account. I played around with it a bit. I couldn't get it looking very good, so I'm going to go back to cheating old school, and I get to use my laser pointer. So I'll outline my trips in India. So I flew into Delhi. Can you guys see that? Flew into Delhi, spent a couple of days, went over to the Corbett National Park, which is over that direction somewhat, Meerut. Then I went down to Mumbai, right? And then I got the bicycle, I rode down right at the bottom there to what I call Trivandrum, but it's got a different name there. Flew to Sri Lanka, then flew back up to what was then, well, it's Chennai, it was Madras. Got the train up to, I call it Calcutta. I then got the train to Lucknow, and then I ended up back in Delhi to fly out again. Alright, so if that comes out, we'll use that, and then I'll tell you about each of those stages of the journey. Without going out of my room, I can know all things in heaven. The farther one travels, the less one knows, the less one really knows. Hello, did you like that? Ganesh. So today I'm going to talk to you about the last big trip I took. In the days of IT contracting, sometimes I take a year off. There's a few other videos where I went back to Africa, and actually in this trip I did get back to Africa, but the first place I went to was India, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Talking about 1990. I flew from Melbourne to India. I think I was in India for about 3 or 4 months. Flew to London, and then I flew down to see Dad in Zimbabwe. That was the last time I saw Dad in Africa. I was there about 2 or 3 months, I think. Don't think I went down to South Africa. When Brian picked me up from the airport last year, he said, "When did I last see you?" And I thought it was 1990, but I'm not sure now because I can't find any evidence. I tend to think I stopped and plopped when I got to Dad's, but anyway, that's after my recollections of India. So why did I go to India? Well, I had some historical interest. I'd read this book, Indian Mutiny, which is fantastic, and I wanted to see the Siege of Lucknow and the Black Hole at Calcutta, some of those places. So there was an historical interest already there. There was a love of the Indian food, big fan of Indian food, and I was working, doing a contract at the end of the year, or the end of the 80s for the Vic Roads Corporation. They look after car registrations and road fixing, and I was in the IT department doing contract work, and there was a lady called Christina. She was a New Zealander, part Thai. Her mother was Thai and her father was a Kiwi, so got very friendly with her. A lot of New Zealanders, they're very laid back people. They smoke a lot of weed, I'm talking generally, and they love their music and alternate lifestyles. So got friendly with Christina. Now she was in her mid-20s, but she was married to a guy called Brian, not my Brian, an older guy. He was about 40, and I think he was in computing as well, probably an analyst or a programmer or something, but also a very laid back guy. Used to go over and see them, and he had CDs were fairly new. He had a big sound system, and he loved his music, but they loved the indie alternate stuff. Anyway, got friendly with Brian as well as her. One time he took me magic mushrooming, just not far from here, Mount Macedon. There were mushrooms up there. Me and Brian went in his car, and I was eating them as soon as we found them, and tripping out all the way home back to Christina's place. But that's for another story. But anyway, he'd been to India, and he mentioned going to this ashram. And I knew that the Indians had been to Rishikesh, to their ashram where they met, you know, the Maharishi Ben Yogi, and they entered that phase of Indian spiritualist. And I liked that. I liked that aspect. He described life, you know, as travelling around India. I knew it was chaotic and crowded and hot, but it had many of the things that Africa had. It had wildlife, game reserves, so I could see tiger and all their Indian animals. The Jungle Book had been with me all my life from when I was a cub. There were the battlegrounds, food, temples. There were beaches. I never had any interest in going north. It was always south to the hot weather and the beaches. I also had friends that I worked with from Sri Lanka, so that was in the back of my mind that I would go to Sri Lanka as well and visit some of my friends' family. So in the weeks before I flew out, went to an Indian restaurant with a group of friends in Bridge Road, Richmond, and we sat down for a meal, and the waiter, probably a student, I told him I was heading to India in a week or two, and he said, "Oh, you must see my father." He gave me this name of Gupta travel agents. I didn't realise that Gupta is as common as Smith in Delhi. I had a Lonely Planet book when I planned this trip, and part of the book mentioned as an alternate way of getting around, you could consider getting a bicycle, and that appealed to me. The crowded buses and trains, yeah, I knew they'd get to me, but the idea of a bicycle, and it even mentioned getting a local bicycle rather than like a racing bike with gears, just get a big black clunker like they ride over there. So that appealed to me, so that's what I was going to do. So I flew out of Melbourne. It was a bit of heartbreak before I left. This person that I was head over heels with was on again, off again, showed a bit of interest in me just before I left, so I cancelled the flight, or I delayed the flight for a week or so, trying to catch up with them to see if we could rekindle something, but it wasn't going to happen. But in that time, I went for this haircut. I told a friend of mine that I was going to India, and they said, "Oh, you'll have to go and see my friend. They'll give you a really good haircut for India." And maybe I wasn't listening, maybe I was too busy talking, maybe I was stoned or something. But when I got in the chair, whatever lunatic this was, they cut my hair. It was about that long, which turned out to be a good haircut for India, but I was horrified. It left me in tears, you know, I cried my eyes out. Anyway, eventually it didn't work out with this person, so I got on the plane and I flew to India. I think I stopped in Bangkok overnight, had a look around, went to a Thai wrestling, Thai kickbox fight that night. But anyway, I got to India the next day, to Delhi, right? And the first thing that struck me was the chaos. As soon as you walked out, you know, the heat and the tropics, lots of people yelling and tugging at you, calling for you. You know, they were probably taxi drivers and that. Somehow I made my way to the bus that took me into Delhi Central, and on the way, there were lots of fascinating bazaars and shops and all that. I saw this mask, right, hanging from a shop, from a wall, and I tried to remember where. I like masks. I tried to remember where the shop was in an attempt to get back to it. I didn't realise they sell them all over India. It's a Hindu thing. On that bus, it had stenciled on the back seat of all the buses, or bus seats, "Beware of bums, report to driver." And I was looking under the seats, wondering if there were hobos and bums, you know, sitting under there or sleeping under there, which seemed a bit strange. I realised later they were talking about bombs, but they spelled it as bums. So that was kind of funny. So I got to this big, I think they called it a square, but it was really a circle with an island in the middle, and there were all these British Raj colonial sort of architecture, shops and buildings around this big circle. I like the British Raj as well. It's an era of history was particularly interested in, the British in India, right? Lord Curzon is the name I'm thinking of. Was a name that I'd researched and read about, and I actually got to stay where Lord Curzon's residence was in Connecticut, but we'll get there in a moment. So I get to Delhi, walking around, and I'm asking people about Gupta. They're all too busy, they've got no time to talk, or they don't speak English, and so then I started seeing signs for Gupta this, Gupta that, and there was an alleyway with all these Guptas down this alleyway, and I realised that the guy had probably just given me a name to get rid of me, or I don't know. So that was okay. So in walking around this square, which was a circle, this fellow in a tuk-tuk pulled up, and he said, do you need accommodation? I said, yeah, I do. It was probably about 4 in the afternoon now. I mean, my backpack once again, because I was going to be gone for a year, was about 20 kilos. It was hellishly heavy. All my camera stuff. And so he took me to this lodge, like a backpacker's lodge, and there were lots of rooms down this corridor, single sort of rooms, almost like cells, they had sliding bars that would come across, and then you could pull the curtains across for privacy. But there was just like a single bunk in there. That was okay for me, so I went in at about 4:30. I lay on this bunk and I went into this deep sleep, fell fast asleep, and I woke up. It was about 5:30 in the afternoon, and I went for a wander around to get my bearings and see my surroundings, right? And I'll never forget it. It was gorgeous and warm. The sun was starting to come down. There was the dust was in the air, Indian sunset, and everybody was busy. There were men with hammers hammering car parts. People were welding, not wearing welding glasses. There were cattle and donkeys, people pushing carts, people doing haircuts on the side of the pavement. No one was idle. No one was sitting like I am now. They were all doing stuff. And yes, they were friendly enough. Some of them said hello, whatever. And I eventually found where the people were eating, and I went into a couple of the places. They didn't speak English. All the menus were in Hindi, but I pointed and I made clear that I wanted curry. The food was always fantastic in India. So got to sat down. They brought out the bread, the naan bread or whatever from the tandoor, and the curry, and it was fantastic. So that was my introduction to India. Real chaotic, real crowded, real busy. And for Westerners like me, totally never knew what was going on from minute to minute, what they were talking about, what they were doing. I had no idea. Anyway, so I did do a couple of little trips when I was in Delhi that first time, I think. I can't remember if I went to 2 different places or they're the same place, but there was Corbett National Park and Ranthambore. So I wanted to see wildlife, so I went out on this bus trip to Corbett National Park. It's sort of to the east, I think, of Delhi. It was a couple of hours in this bus. It was quite cold in the mornings. That's where this thing comes into it, right? So I bought this thing to keep me warm on those Delhi mornings. They got little mirrors on them. It's quite nice. So I wrapped this around me on those Delhi mornings when it was cold, right, and got on the bus, as I said, a couple of hours, got to the national park. It reminded me just of Africa. There were lots of Indian guys working there in the khaki shorts and khaki shirts, and you stayed in little lodges. You went out each day in these jeeps looking for the animals. Tigers, there were tigers there. I took some fantastic shots of tiger. I didn't realise that all the jeeps we were in, they were all linked by walkie-talkie. They were these Indian Tata tank jeeps. So they'd let the other drivers know, oh, there's tiger. It's not very big, so you're gonna see tiger. Or the others would race there, and then you could get your photos. There was a beautiful lake in the middle. I think it was at that place. It had an old abandoned hunter's lodge, and they said if you're wealthy you can stay there. I had visions of having a honeymoon there with this sweetheart of mine. Yeah, I would like to have had a honeymoon there, but probably wouldn't have suited the other party very much, but that was my idea. But anyway, I also went to Ranthambore, and as I said, I can't remember if they're the same place or not, but there's pictures of me sitting on this sidewalk, and I thought it was up north, like Jaipur or somewhere like that, with lots of Indian kids around me, and I've got the real short hair, and you know, these kids would be sitting on my knee and tickling me, and you know, so I'd be making like a train. I'd grab their arm and go hello, and go while I was shaking their hands, you know, and then go doot doot, and they were in hysterics. So yeah, so I think there were a couple of day trips I did out of Delhi, but as I said, my plan was to go down south, and to do that I was going to get a bicycle. So here's the next thing. So I thought, well, I'll get the train to the outer suburban loop of Bombay, right? I can't remember how I got from Delhi to Mumbai. Some of the names I'm going to use the old names. Bombay, right, had the arches of India where the British troops would march through, and if you arrived in India you went through these arches. So this is the third time I've told this story, by the way. The other two didn't work out on the video. So yeah, I get the train to the end of the suburban line. This is and of course it was packed. It was late afternoon, I think. No, it was mid-morning. Yeah, and lugging this 20-kilo bloody backpack with me. So I see the station coming up. I get up off the seat. I start heading towards the doors. Of course, everybody's packed in there like sardines, and the train stops, and I'm trying to be polite, saying excuse me, but they're hardly parting for me, and I've only gone forward about 3 or 4 steps when the train takes off again, and I thought, the being polite's not going to cut it. We got to go full barrel with these bastards. So when we get to the next train, we're approaching the next platform, and I just put my head down and smashed my way through them. Head down, elbows out, smashed my way through people till we got there. The doors opened and the train was already moving off before I had even cleared the people, because I had to jump off the train as the train was moving. So my feet kept up with it for a few steps, and then I lost my footing and I rolled on the platform with my backpack. They were cheering, clapping, whistling. So that was why I wanted to get a bicycle, to avoid situations like that. So I found a lodge. I don't know how I did that. Put my backpack down and I went out. Just about midday, I think, I went looking to get this bicycle. There were plenty of shops that were fixing bicycles, but I couldn't find anyone selling them, and I wanted a second-hand, just one of those big black, I don't know whether they're Raleighs or something the Indians ride, one of them. So yeah, I'm walking around, looking around. So these two guys come up to me. You know, they had slacks on, shirts, and they asked me what I was looking for or doing, and I explained to them, look, I want to buy a bicycle. And they said, oh yeah, we know someone who sells second-hand bicycles, but how about we have lunch first and talk about it and get to know each other? And okay. It was a hot day. So they took me to this restaurant. It was very dark and shady inside the restaurant. They had these big thick curtains they drew around the windows of the restaurant. We were the only ones there. Ordered a cold beer. You know, first bottle they brought out tended to be cold, and then the next ones would be room temperature. That's how it worked. So I started ordering the food, the curries and the rice and the raita and the, you know, kachumba and pickles, all that good stuff. My new friends, one of them tells me he's a bank manager, the other one reckons he's an accountant, and we're getting pretty jolly. The beers are flowing, we're eating the food. So but they didn't seem to be making any tracks towards getting me the bicycle, so I said, come on guys, got to wind it up now. It was about 1:30 in the afternoon now. We've been there an hour and a half or so, and I said, so let's get the bill and we'll go and do what we have to do. So I noticed them starting to fumble around making excuses, and one of them headed off to the toilet, and they didn't come back in sort of 5 minutes, 10 minutes. So I went looking for him, and he was trying to squeeze out of the window of the bathroom, you know. So I pulled him by the ankles, grabbed him. I called the waiters. I said, stop him, stop him. The other one was hiding behind the curtains. I could see his feet sticking out from under the curtains. So I said to the waiters, look, I'm not paying for them. I don't even know them. You know, I said, I'll pay for my food and I'll put in a bit of extra, another 50 rupee or something. But you deal with them any way you want, but I'm not paying for their food. So that was my first wake up. I must admit that I was pretty lucky in India. Some of the other Westerners I met really got had, but I was pretty lucky, and I was even changing money on the streets. You know, you could get really good exchange rates on the street. Some Westerners were handing their money over, getting an envelope which looked like rupee when he hands it to you, but when he's disappeared and you open up, it's shredded newspaper. That never happened to me. Anyway, back at the hotel or the lodge, I mentioned it to the receptionist that I was looking for a bicycle, and you know, it was only 15 minutes later. Tap tap on the door, and one of the guys that worked at this hotel had this bike, and he said, you know, is this what you're after? And I said, yeah, perfect. It had a bell on it, but big leather seat, very heavy thing, these big vicious pedals. Sometimes when pushing it, the pedal would come around and hit me in the back of the leg. I wore blue noddy shorts, big baggy noddy shorts that I bought for a costume party back in Australia when I needed to be noddy. And for footwear, I favoured your volley, your white Dunlop volley, and I wore those things till they were shredded. Before I left India, and they were shredded, those volleys. Anyway, so the next day I took the bike to one of those shops, and I got fitted this luggage rack. So when I rode, I could put the weight of the backpack on the rack. I had like a water canteen I carried. All my camera stuff was in a satchel over my shoulder, and I took off, you know, south from Mumbai. And it was really easy going. For the first couple of days, it was real easy going. We went through Goa. It was very flat. There were some beautiful old ruins of Portuguese churches in Goa. I'd pull off the side. I'd park the bike. I'd run and jump in the ocean, have a swim. You know, the beach was always on one side of my road south. And, you know, stop and have the beautiful curries. And there were things they had called lemon soda. Little kids selling these, they'd have an ice bucket with these little bottles that were old-fashioned. They had like a marble at the top. When they opened them, they were soda water. When they opened them, the marble would be released and the gas would come out, and they'd put fresh lemon juice in there, and it was really refreshing. I tried to avoid drinking the water for a while, but after a week or two on the bike, when the water was put in front of me, I was so thirsty, everyone else was drinking it, so I just started drinking the local water, and I didn't have a problem with that. When I finished through Goa, Goa's not a very big state. I kept rolling because it was flat, I suppose. I was making pretty good time. Then we got into Karnataka, where they make the sandalwood, right? So that's where this guy comes from. It's a lamp. Tried to get a friend to fit on the back, like a lamp fitting. Right? So he comes from there. He comes from Karnataka. And that's when things started to get a little more complicated. So we started going up these rises, and the ocean seemed to be a long way away then. We went over this mountain range, and it was horrendous. Pushing the bike up, the slope was like that. It was hellishly hot. And I felt like giving up at that stage. Felt like, hitchhiking and going back down leaving the bike in the forest. But anyway, I kept going, and I got to what I thought was a summit, and there was a flat area, and it went off to the side. There was forest with this thick leafy undergrowth, and I was just stuffed, so I went and put the bike on its side. I went and lay on this on the forest floor, you know, with these big like banyan trees or whatever they are, Indian trees above me, and I just lay there trying to get my breath, and it was so hot and I was so exhausted. And then this breeze came through. I could hear it coming, and like all the leaves were rustling as this breeze came through the forest and straight at me, and it seemed to rejuvenate me. So I got up again. I got on the bike and I rode up another kilometre or something, and then I was on the actual, you know, summit, and I could look down, and the road went all the way down like that as far as I could see. And then way off in the distance was the glimmering blue of the Indian Ocean. So I was able to just cruise then. I just got on the bike and I just rolled and cruised till it was about 10 or 15 kilometres that I rolled until I got to the beachfront, ran, dropped the bike in the sand, ran, dropped the backpack along the way, and leapt into the ocean in my noddy shorts. And it was glorious, beautiful, warm, tepid blue water. And the beach was white sand with coconut trees, and just further up there were kids in hammocks and guys selling food and beers and drinks. And so I found this lodge to stay. This woman was renting out rooms, and she didn't speak much English, but enough to tell me. And actually, I know now it was Easter. It was Good Friday, because she said to me, "Are you Christian?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "We're going to church tonight, midnight mass." So she was obviously Catholic. So I went along with her, and it was packed. It was in this hall, and they were sitting on wooden seats, and I only lasted about 20 minutes. It was all in Hindi. And I said, "I'm going back to the room." And I left her to it, and I think I rode off the next morning. One of those places I stayed was, as I mentioned earlier on, was Lord Curzon's official residence. There was a British residence in somewhere along that way in Karnataka. It was a little town that had the old British residence. I read it in My Lonely Planet, and as you rode through, there was the old walls of the residence where the gates would have been on a long driveway. And I rode up there and I knocked on the door. These guys let me in, and I was the only one there. We sat in the old dining room with this really long table, and they made me some eggs and bread. There was the old ballroom, but I stayed in Lord Curzon's room. He was one of the last governors, I think, of India. Curzons are a very famous name. So that was pretty good. Then got riding again. Yeah, it was, the difficulty was you would stop and try and get something to eat, and it would be hot, especially around midday. The heat would be oppressive. I might sit under a tree, I might get some, it was difficult to know what to order. I found those dosai things were good in the end, but initially I didn't know what to order to eat. But I'd sit there to eat some food, maybe some samosas or something, and they'd see you, the locals would see you, and they'd come around, be half a dozen or 10 of them sitting around watching you. They didn't really speak English. They might know, there was one phrase, "What does your daddy do?" became common. But they didn't really speak English, but they were just fascinated with me. And it became quite annoying, you put the food to your mouth and they're all following your hand. Not that they were hungry and wanted the food. They were just curious about a white person on a local bicycle, I suppose. So yeah, I found that a bit annoying. But that's why I was on the bicycle, so I didn't have to put up with the crowds and the the chaos. Anyway, I don't know how long I rode for, but I got down to Kerala, and then to a place I call Trivandrum. I think it's got a different name on the map now. And Yeah, so I got to the outskirts of this Trivandrum, and it was on a bay. It was gorgeous, sort of a half-moon bay, and there were all these restaurants which had their tables on the sand, and as tide would come in, the water would come up near these tables, and you could sit and have your dinner there. And there were candles. When you looked along the bay, were all these candles flickering. It was absolutely gorgeous. So I'm pushing my bicycle, looking around, when this big Indian guy with a handlebar moustache came up. Spoke good English, and he says, you know, are you looking for somewhere to stay? I said, yes, I am. He reckoned he'd been in the British Army. He'd been a staff sergeant in the British Army. He was very complimentary towards my legs. You know, I was very fit, having ridden all that time. So he was very complimentary. He said, you know, please, Sahib, you know, please don't you ruin your body with the many drugs here on offer. Please don't take the drugs. You have a magnificent body. Please do not pollute with the drugs, you know. So yeah, he showed me the lodge. So that's where I stayed, and so that night was the only time I ever got sick in India. I went out and I ordered this food, and I still remember what I ordered. It was swordfish, right? Tandoori swordfish. We'd probably been sitting out in the sun all day with flies all over it. So when I ate this thing in one of those lovely restaurants on the beachfront, thinking how romantic it was, except I was on my own, not long after consuming the fish, I started feeling dizzy and hot. By the time I got back to the lodge, the staff sergeant was there, and I explained to him, I said, look, I'm not really good, I ate this fish. Oh, very good, very good. You know, get you a bucket. So he got me this bucket. He said, you must throw it up. You must throw it, get rid of it from your body. Get rid of it. Oh, I threw up all this fish, and by the next day, yeah, I was okay. Lots of stuff on that beach. Indian mystics, holy men, tricksters doing, you know, with baskets. You know, the snake coming out of the basket while he plays the flute. That was a good tourist spot, you know. So yeah, lots going on there. Fortune reading, and that's where we're going to finish this episode. I sold the bicycle to someone at that lodge. The staff sergeant organised someone to buy the bicycle. I sold it for the same amount that I bought it for, and I bought my ticket to fly to Sri Lanka from, you know, Trivandrum. So that's where we'll leave today's episode until I can get another sunny day to do part 2. I hope this has worked out, because as I said, this is the third time I've told the story. But yeah, alright, if you've liked this and you want to hear more, then I'll do another episode soon. Alright, bye.